Hello, Danusia here, host of Parents Who Think. This week, I'm joined by time use researcher and author Laura Vanderkam to unpick the myths we've absorbed about motherhood, success, and the ticking clock. Laura's known for dismantling the idea that ambition and family life are at war, but this isn't a shiny productivity chat. Together, we talk about the cultural seduction of overwork, how women are crafting time-rich lives, and why managing your hours isn't about squeezing more in. It's about seeing clearly. If you've ever felt like there just isn't enough time, this episode will give you pause and maybe a different lens. Welcome to the podcast, Laura.
Hello, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I mean, how does it feel to concentrate so much on this thing called time in your career?
Well, it's just a subject that fascinates me as it fascinates many people. I mean, time is really our common denominator. Many people have more or less money than other people. People may be more or less connected or smart or whatever, but we all have the exact same amount of time. And so I find it fascinating to see how different people allocate the 24 hours we all have each day or the 168 hours we all have each week. And so, I decided to study women who did have big careers and also have families and see what their day-to-day lives actually look like. And I had many, many of them track their time for a week so I could look hour by hour at where the time really went. And what I discovered is that life was a lot more doable than you might think from the popular narrative. I mean, people, worked reasonable hours, of course. I mean, they weren't skimping on hours by any means, but they did get enough sleep. They spent plenty of time with their families. Most were exercising. Many were hanging out with friends, doing hobbies. I mean, their lives looked a lot better than you would get from this impression of, working women's being invariably harried and pulled in many directions.
What was it that you found in terms of the themes of, like, how did they create more time? How did they find time to go do, see friends, hobbies?
The truth is, it's not actually that difficult to find time if you are sort of mindful of how much there is or that things don't have to happen every single day. I mean, I call this the 168-hour mindset. People are often looking at any individual day and saying, well, if I, was at the office till 6, then there's only a certain number of hours outside of that. But Tuesday is not the only day that exists. And so, if you look at the whole of 168 hours, if you are working 40 hours a week, which is a full-time job, sleeping 8 hours a night, so that's 56 hours per week, you have 72 hours for other things. So, is it possible to hang out with your family, have hobbies, exercise, read, watch TV, whatever in 72 hours? Well, probably yes. Probably it is. And, one of the ways that's possible is that people weren't actually working around the clock. There's this misperception that big jobs inevitably require extreme hours. But there's some pretty good evidence that people overestimate how many hours they are working. We have a tendency to remember our worst days as typical. When you force people to actually keep track of it, the number tends to be quite a bit lower. So the women in my study who are all earning over $100,000 in, US dollars here, which is, generally considered a big amount, they worked on average 44 hours a week. Now, that is more than 40, of course, but it is not a lot more than 40. And so it seems that there are, payoffs to working a little bit more than the average, but it may not require quite as many hours above the average as people tend to believe.
It's exactly that, isn't it? We are led to believe that it's 80 hours rather than 40, that you have to really give of yourself to this incredible amount that you have nothing. You kind of crawl into bed and then get up and that's it.
The truth is, even if you are working, let's say 60 hours, which is about the max that people will put in on a regular basis in a big job, if you're sleeping 8 hours a night, 56 hours per week, you still have time outside of this. You have, 52 hours for other things, which is not a small amount of time. And of course, people are like, well, if you're working 60 hours, you'd be gone from, 8 to 8 every day. So you'd never see your kids. It's like, well, 8 to 8, 5 days a week. There are 7 days in a week. So yes, you do still see your kids. But that's also not the way these people tended to work. A lot of women move time around. They would, for instance, leave work at a normal time, come home, spend the evening with their families, and then do more work at night after their kids went to bed. So that way they could work longer hours by giving up TV time as opposed to giving up family time. So it's just the trade-offs people think that are being made are not the ones that are often being made.
Exactly. But it's a very convenient argument, isn't it, really?
Well, it is. I try not to be too cynical and suspicious here, but there may be some people in the upper or trying to get into the upper echelons of companies who, want to get rid of some of the competition. And if you can convince any woman who wants a family that there's no way she can succeed, well, that, knocks out a big chunk of people who might be, gutting for the jobs that you want too. I think it's a very convenient story for certain people. And so it doesn't get challenged as much as it should be.
It is a fascinating study, and I remember when your book came out, how it did crack open this idea of exactly how women are using their time and what is possible. What do you give up in your actual life? What do you compromise on?
Well, I don't watch a lot of TV. That's something that just doesn't really appeal to me all that much. I won't say I never do anything that's sort of time wasting, though. I spend probably way too much time. Just won't claim that it's any more noble. But that's something that by not watching television, I tend to have more time for other things, both for work, for hanging out with family, and for doing things like reading and exercising. I work for myself, which offers some flexibility, but that means, I'm also not in sort of meetings and such that I have not chosen to be in. I've worked from home for a great many years. And so by not having a commute, that frees up an incredible amount of time. It's certainly half an hour both ways is not a huge commute, but that half hour both ways adds up to an hour a day, and 5 hours a week is not a small amount for, that's probably about the amount that people would consider to be good for reading or exercising. So those are trade-offs that wind up getting made there.
So you talked about innovation around remote working. What are the kinds of things that you are seeing that organizations are doing?
Well, one of the best things is recognizing that not everyone works best from 9 to 5. And the upside of remote work is that you escape from some of those group time norms that forces everyone to a certain schedule, even if they don't really need to be on that schedule. And so when, the pandemic first started and people were first working from home, or a lot of organizations were doing these like 9 a.m. check-ins. Like, let's make sure everyone is online at 9 a.m. And it's sort of ridiculous because if you have responsible professional adults, like they're not watching Netflix during the day just to do so. Like that does not happen. People are more likely to never take breaks than to sit there watching Netflix during the day. So, I think as we get into a more mature understanding of what it means to do remote work, you're seeing that like, okay, well, you have your certain meeting schedule for the day. If you don't have a meeting before 10, maybe if you're not really at your best at 8 a.m., then don't start till 10, but work later in the day. Or maybe if you need a longer break during the day, you can start early and then take a long lunch and then work into the evening to get sort of your, to-do list for the day done. But it doesn't have to happen between 9 and 5. And even teams that work really, really closely together can come up with a set of core hours that are for collaboration, and then let people work the hours they choose to around that. You just figure out what works for you.
And how do you recommend that people have a conversation about that within a team?
If you are in a managerial position, obviously this is a lot easier. You just talk with your team and say, hey, I would like people to be happy. I would like people to feel productive. I think, yes, we need to work closely together, but I think we all need our individual focus time too, where we're not pinging each other. If you are not in a managerial position, you might suggest it, work your network, find another similar company that's been trying something like that and say, here's what the upsides would be for us. Like, yes, obviously you can still call people if you need to. Like if you absolutely need something, pick up the phone and call. But people, if they generally know that they're only going to be required to be on from say 11 to 3, then they can, make sure they are fully on during that time. You're going to have more quick response during that time. And then people will feel less distracted at other times because they're not going to, feel that pressure to be constantly available, lest everyone think they're watching Netflix or something like that. You could also just try it out and say, well, why don't we experiment with this for a few weeks and see how we do? And of course, if you'd like to do this long term, as well as I do that you need to make those the best 3 to 4 weeks of your working life. But when you can show what you can do, then that tends to let people feel okay with continuing it going forward.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating idea and a really brilliant idea to set these collaborative hours and to get aligned around who works best, when, who will be available. I love that. And this is definitely how organizations are the best organizations, the better ones, are doing it, rather than those absolutely ridiculous, we're all sharing breakfast together on a Friday and we're having a drink.
Is any organization that has a 9 a.m. required check-in needs to also have a 4:45 p.m. goodbye ceremony where they tell everyone to get off, right? If you're doing one, you make sure you're doing the other because you are setting hours then, and then you need to have a stop on the hours too. And yet curiously, that 4:45 p.m. goodbye ceremony is a lot less popular than the 9 a.m. sign-on.
Yeah, isn't that odd? Strange, yes. Yeah. What can you tell listeners about optimizing their ability to socialize when they're working remotely? Fascinating. Love to hear it.
Well, one good thing to do is start all meetings with a few minutes of scheduled social chit chat. Everyone's going to do it anyway. So it's better to account for it in the agenda and have it directed by the person who is organizing the meeting. Yeah? Ask everyone a social question in turn. Because that allows everyone to hear everybody else's voice and to establish the norms of trust and that we are all being part of this conversation. You can do virtual social events. The key thing is that they need to be facilitated. You can't just all make yourself a cocktail, stare at your screen, and have 10 boxes of other people with cocktails staring back at you. It's like having 10 people at a dinner table. You can't manage the conversation. Somebody winds up dominating it. It becomes bad, a bad family dinner. It's just, you need somebody to direct it, to ask people questions. You're better off with smaller groups. And if you're going to have a facilitated smaller group, it's better to give it a purpose. So I, say that book clubs are better than happy hours, or, have an art teacher come on and, mail everybody art supplies and you can all get on and paint something together, or, hire a musician to give you a small concert and then teach you something about how she plays her instrument. But something that's more facilitated can be a great way to socialize. And then, the key thing is it's not going to be either or. We are not going to see many organizations be 100% virtual long term. They may be for now, but as we move more to this hybrid model where people are in the office 2 to 3 days per week and in their home office 2 to 3 days per week, you will see people just naturally concentrating the socializing on the days that they are in the office. And if that's done consciously and done well, you're going to have the exact same effect as if you were in the office for 5 days, but not really thinking about how you do it.
I think it's a really exciting period. I think it's a wonderful time. If we can see this as an opportunity in organizational change terms, I think it's such a powerful period of time. And teams will, reap the benefits. I'm absolutely positive about that if they are kind of held and managed properly.
Yeah. We've seen, a decade worth of organizational change put into a couple of months. And so obviously there is going to be some bumps in the road. Working from home is a skill. And so, of course, people are horrible at it on day one. That's why you have those bad Zoom happy hours. But you get better with time and practice. You definitely will get better. And so we're seeing that now. We come to this more mature understanding of what remote work can be. And so, yes, I think it's really exciting for people to figure out that actually a lot of this stuff doesn't have to be done face to face. You're seeing some exciting moves in terms of telemedicine, like the number of doctor visits that can be done remotely. Why were we wasting such big chunks of our lives sitting in germy waiting rooms in the past? It's hard to know. People figuring out that, if you have to, you can pitch new work by Zoom. There was always this idea that, when you're meeting a client, it has to be face to face because they're paying you all this money. Well, it turns out they'll pay you money for the answers. They don't actually have to have you sitting right there if you're giving them the answers. That's what they're paying for. And now that has been broken through, it's going to be interesting to see how all those client service firms change their model too. It's just changing so much stuff.
It is. It's a wonderful, wonderful subject, listeners. Thank you very much for sharing this time, bringing yourself to all the listeners and sharing your expertise. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much for having me.
What Laura brings is data, yes, but it's the frame that matters. The stories we've been sold about women's time are full of martyrdom, scarcity, and self-erasure. But as she shows, there's a different truth unfolding. One where women take their time back, minute by minute. We don't need more time. We need a better narrative about what we do with it. Until next time, keep thinking, keep questioning, and as ever, be kind to yourself.